before we start today's video, I wanted to say a couple of things. The first, I would like to show you my new History Guy shirt. And I'm not paid to say this. I don't think the History Guy even knows that I have this shirt. But this spiffy shirt could be yours. I'll put the link in the description below. And if you've not watched the History Guy, I think you should go over and check out his YouTube channel. I think it's the best channel on YouTube. Second, today's video will be a little longer. I thought about cutting it into pieces or editing it down, but and I am going to edit it down some, but I thought you might be interested in this whole conversation with my daughter about her time serving in a COVID-19 intensive care unit in New York City for a couple of months this spring. So hang in there, get a cup of coffee, go visit the History Guy, and enjoy today's video. Let's better get back to it. Are you sure you're ready?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's recording.
Because we could go anytime.
I thought you have to do the intro.
I could do the intro. You want me to do the intro now?
I don't know.
Well, hello. Welcome to the Serene Disciple Project at Egret Isle Farm. Though today we are not at Egret Isle Farm. We are at the Lake Cottage.
Yes.
Okay. And this is the porch, but it's not my porch. One of the things that I'd always wanted to do with the porch segments, which is all about meaningful conversation, is actually talk to somebody. And so I've gone a year on the porch having meaningful conversations, really just with myself and the camera. But today, I am here with...
Me.
This is Bethany, who is my teeniest little girl. Only she's not little anymore. She's all grown up.
Mm-hmm.
So, how are you, Bethany?
I'm good.
The wind has come up, so I'm sorry if it affects the audio. It'll die back down in a minute. But you mentioned New York.
Yeah.
Bethany went to New York at the height of the COVID-19 pandemic in New York, and then she went to the epicenter of the height of the pandemic, Elmhurst Hospital.
Yeah.
And besides the exorbitant combat pay, what the heck? Why did you do that? You're like those firemen who are running up the stairs while everybody else is running down.
Yeah.
I was very proud of you and frightened for you.
Yes.
So tell me, what the heck?
I graduated from PA school in December, and when you start a new PA job, the credentialing process to start at a hospital is really long, and so I knew that I had like months and months before I could really start. And I'm not exactly a person that loves not being busy. I like to have lots of things, and so
Eggs garden.
yes, eggs garden, many other projects, and so all of this started happening, and I just felt like very useless. I felt that I studied really hard to have this set of skills so that I could help, and I was just like sitting at home all day, and so that I just sort of like started researching ways to get involved. In Austin, at that point it hadn't gotten very bad, so there weren't a lot of ways to get involved. But my friend, who also graduated about the same time as me, texted and said, "Hey, by the way, I'm going to New York with this staffing agency that's staffing an emergency staffing agency with FEMA." And so I guess I immediately saw that as a way that I could get involved and could help.
That's what I was looking for, because what I was hearing was I was bored, and so I decided to run toward the pandemic.
Yeah, bored, but also feeling useless. I don't like feeling useless. And I guess maybe I'm young and dumb. I didn't feel like I was, at the time beforehand, I didn't feel like, I was like, yeah, it's fine. Like,
Yeah.
they need help, I can help, so I can go,
Yeah. Well, very proud of you.
Thanks.
So what did you find when you got there?
So,
Elmhurst Hospital, by the way, is where those pictures came from of the bodies piled up in the refrigerator trucks.
yes.
It was gruesome.
It was gruesome. I think that I liked, there was a doctor who kind of put it, these are, and I think this is an exaggeration, but he was telling his team, these are the sickest patients in the world right now. Because you're in New York, you're in Elmhurst Hospital, which is in a pretty low-income neighborhood. It's a city-run hospital, and I was working in a makeshift ICU unit, and so we had the sickest patients in the hospital, but very few of the resources that the ICU had. And instead of having, an ICU unit of, I think they had like 12 beds or something, we had 35. And so it was gruesome. There's not, I think that whenever people ask me that, I have the urge to put a positive spin on it and kind of like dampen it, but I mean, it is hard to, like, in terms of what it was actually like, it was gruesome and very surreal. Like there were times where you just like forgot that you were in America.
So you saw a lot of death.
Yes.
I had hoped to spare you that, but
then I went into healthcare.
Then you went into healthcare, and then you went to a pandemic.
Yes.
Or went to the epicenter of an epidemic.
Yeah.
So you've seen, so for a lot of us, we see it on the news, we see people in hospital beds. Very few of us actually know anybody who's had COVID-19. So it all seems kind of theoretical. But you've seen a lot of it close up. What you've not had? What's it like to have COVID-19?
It's a very interesting disease because there's such a wide spectrum of symptoms. There was one doctor in the ER who felt completely fine and then checked his oxygen saturation, and it was 80%. And he was walking. Normally, patients with that oxygen saturation are having a really hard time. They're gasping for air. They're, all of that. And we saw a lot of patients come into the ER who had incredibly low oxygen saturations and were walking and talking and everything was fine. But then they would just suddenly crump very quickly.
So what's it look like as it progresses to some of the worst expressions?
Yeah, so it typically, the patients that we would have come into our ICU unit, they would start in the ER. They would say, I've had this for about a week and then now I can't breathe. And they would be put on oxygen. And the timing would vary between, they would go downhill very quickly in a matter of days or a matter of 1 week, 2 weeks, where we would slowly have to escalate them up to higher and higher forms of oxygen, and then to a machine a lot of people use for sleep apnea, where it maintains the pressure in your lungs, and it's extremely uncomfortable. I've never worn one, but I've been told that the BiPAP machine, which is a little bit more advanced than the one you use for sleep apnea, feels like you're drowning. And patients were so uncomfortable on it. You can't eat when you're on it, and these patients, if they would take the mask off for 10 seconds, their oxygen saturation would drop to the low 80s. They were completely dependent on the masks. And then, after if you fail that and you are still having too much trouble breathing, or what we really worry about is you're tiring out. It becomes, as the disease attacks your lungs and you have these fibrosed, very, very thick, leathery lungs, just because of the disease itself, you have to work so hard to breathe that you get physically tired, and you can't, it's like working out, exercising, you just can't keep going. And at that point, we would intubate people. And we... Meaning
ventilator?
Yes, meaning stick a tube down their throat to help them breathe. I think that one of the most frustrating things about working in a hospital that was so completely overwhelmed is that, you have Maslow's hierarchy or whatever, and it's the same thing with medicine. You have priorities, and the first priority is just keeping them alive at the basest level. And then at the top, you want to treat them and help them get better. But if you don't have enough people to keep people alive, you have too many people who are dying, you don't really have the resources or the time to actually try to treat them.
Yeah.
And so what we found was just in those first 2 weeks or so that I was there, we weren't doing the spontaneous breathing trials because you can't really keep people, like if there's a code every hour and you're just running from heart stop to heart stop to heart stop, you don't have time to do a spontaneous breathing trial. You don't have the ICU nurses. We're all in the ICUs. We didn't have enough ICU nurses to go around, and so we have nurses who are used to a lower level acuity who don't know how to do sedation drips. And so there's all of these different components that just fall apart as a hospital becomes overwhelmed.
And so that's kind of what, authorities, people are afraid of happening, why we watch the hospitalization rates and so the numbers in this area are climbing now.
Yeah.
And that's concerning. But I wanted to ask you, I didn't tell you I was going to ask you this. You, if I understood right, you helped sometimes by holding the camera up to the window of the room so that families could get a kind of a last view of their loved one. That has to be tough.
Yeah, that was by far the most heartbreaking thing I did. At night, and for those first 2 weeks, we didn't really have access to any sort of thing to help them, and so the people working would often use their personal cell phones, which, if it's always really risky trying, potentially giving a patient's family member your contact information, but we just felt like, it was too important, and so yeah, it was really hard, essentially donning all the protective gear and then going into the room actually and kind of holding the phone up to the person and just sitting there kind of off camera holding it and giving them a moment. But I think that's really important,
Yeah. So last question, maybe, unless I think of another one. There are people who think that COVID-19, coronavirus, the whole thing is just kind of overblown. It's just a cold. What's the big deal? Won't wear a mask. Not like us. But what do you say to those people? I can say that, but all I've done is watch the news same as them.
Yeah.
And if we're watching different news, then we just have different perspectives. But you have a kind of a unique perspective. What do you say?
Yeah. I think this is a really hard thing to wrap your head around for anybody. I remember, when you're in New York, we were all housed in the same hotel. We took this bus that the company had hired. We went to the hospital. We worked together. There was no social distancing because we worked 12-hour shifts 7 days a week. There wasn't, any time. And so if you were to eat, they would feed us. And so you really just went hospital, hotel. So when I came back and my 14-day quarantine was nearing the end, I just remember thinking, I don't even want to be done with quarantine because this is so confusing to live in this world, to try and think about what's the right thing to do, what's not the right thing to do. So I will completely admit, and I think anybody who's silly if they don't admit that it's confusing and hard to try to maintain this long term. But I will say, having seen it and having seen so many flus and so many colds, it's not a cold or a flu, the things that happen to the body in the severe cases of this disease are astounding. I would look at lab values that were coming back for these patients and just think, how is this person alive? These are not numbers that are conducive to life. And, blood clotting so fast that their kidneys would be failing and we would have to give them dialysis, which is a portable machine that filters the blood, but you can't filter blood that keeps clotting up and breaking the machine. And just things like that. That doesn't happen with the flu. It's a very multi-systemic disease that we don't understand. And I think that's something that really frustrates people too, that sometimes when you view science as this, science tells us what to do, and then there are all of these conflicting research studies coming out, and first you're not supposed to wear a mask, and then you are supposed to wear a mask, and first you're, this drug works, but then all of a sudden it turns out that drug hurts you, that it can feel very angering and disappointing in science, and you kind of lose faith. So I think part of my answer would be it's really important to realize that we are all figuring this out together, and science included. Science takes time. It's one of the most frustrating things about science, but
it doesn't work in sound bites well.
Exactly. That, we are all scrounging for information, and sometimes that can lead us down the wrong road, but that it's good because we catch ourselves. But the conflicting information that you hear, and the one, now it's this and now it's that, isn't necessarily a reason to not trust the research. It's just, okay, we're figuring it out. And I think that everybody kind of faces a choice in life and a balancing act in life about your own interests versus societal interests versus the interests of the people you love. And it's not an easy thing to say, and especially there are people who the sacrifices have involved their jobs, their income. This is an economically disastrous time. But I think that everybody just kind of has to walk a line and try to balance that as best they can. I don't think that any get together outside of your family household is a moral wrong. I get asked a lot. I get a lot of texts saying, "Am I a bad person if I do this? Would I be a terrible, irresponsible person?" And my response is always sort of like,
you may be a bad person, but not because of that.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I don't know. Other stuff, cool, but I have a big problem with the moral component that we've kind of made this into a political issue.
Yeah.
And I am a big proponent of, and in medicine in general, you have to do what works in your life. We have to make sacrifices, but you don't have to sacrifice everything. Kind of use your own background and your life to kind of figure it out. So for us, this is an example of we're not wearing masks. And I am okay with that because, we are having a small family get together out at the farm on Saturday. And as part of that, more than a week in advance, we texted and we said, this is what we're all doing for isolation. And so Zach and I made plans to isolate ourselves for 7 days. And then at the farm, be outside, which is generally becoming kind of a safer area to be. So that's what I mean. I guess just take the guidelines and try to make them work for your life. But I will also say that experts are experts for a reason. Experts don't know everything, but these are people who have dedicated their lives to studying the various components of this happening. There are people, epidemiologists and virologists and public health officials who have dedicated their careers and sought undergrad, graduate, PhD education in the thing that's happening now. And so to completely disregard all of it and say, well, I'm not going to wear a mask at all, this is just a big hoax, you're overreacting, to me that feels a little arrogant. And maybe that's harsh to say, but
Are you thinking a little arrogant?
very
Very
I think it's really important to always have a voice of your own and to not just wholeheartedly say, okay, whatever you say, but to then also be on the other extreme and to say, you guys don't know anything, and I don't know anyone who's gotten COVID, and maybe the person I know is just very minor, so therefore Your parents had to try to make you understand, like, please trust me, I've been through all of this before. It's kind of a childish thing to do.
You're 15, it's 6th Street at 2 in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
This
No,
isn't
it'll
a
be
good
okay.
idea.
I won't get hurt.
Yeah, you know. And then you learn, you know, as an adult, what you can kind of eke out and what you can't, and
Yeah.
what you can live with yourself for doing, and what, you know. I think that if you feel the need to prove yourself by not wearing a mask, or to justify why you're not wearing a mask, or, you know, to make it into this political issue,
Yeah.
then to me at least, that feels like you know what you're doing isn't right.
Yeah.
And so what can you do to make that feel right within your own personal ethics? To, you know, yeah.
Yeah.
For sure.
All right. Well, thank you for this conversation.
Yeah.
So, next week, the Serene Disciple Project will be off for a week. As I think I've said before, I'm working on a master's in professional counseling, and 1 week per semester is an intensive on-campus week. Well, this coming week, because of COVID-19, is not on campus. It's actually virtual, but I'll be in class from 8 in the morning till 5:30 or 6 at night every day next week. And so the Serene Disciple Project will be back in 2 weeks. Well, thank you. I think we have a lot to think about, and we'll see you in 2 weeks.
Where's the credits?
Hmm?
Where's the credits? They don't.
They're playing now. You can't hear them?